Welcome to ECETI Stargate and BBS Radio. We've got another interesting show for you. We just went through a blood moon eclipse reset along with a major planetary alignment. What an amazing time to release the past and redirect one's life purpose in a positive direction. A lot of people don't even know what their unique purpose is, so you might want to try to figure that one out too. I'm sure the UFO and UAPs we're seeing around the world, uh, beware of the AI and CGI, generated ones. The real clearly defined ones are most likely ours or, fake, although there are physical craft, but when their systems are activated, you lose definition. The energy fields around most UFOs make it hard to get a clear photo. So some of the photos are pretty crazy. Let's go ahead and show those moon photos. Looks like the EU is going down in flames. Giorgia Meloni, in her Make Italy Great Again, exposed them all and their tyrannical maneuvers. Uh, you know, Ursula von der Leyen, the unelected head of the global elite world domination EU, was sent packing by Georgia. And now Trump is threatening to arrest her if she comes to America. So I think we're pretty much done with these unelected global elite. We'll see what happens. Many officials and leaders in the EU and Britain are listed in the Epstein files. It's not just America, so this is global. According to the real Cindy Alexis, that's interesting. She has a podcast. The DOJ just received criminal referrals from the Director of National Intelligence for former President Barack Obama, James Clapper, John Brennan, Susan Rice, Loretta Lynch, Andy McCabe, and John Kerry for manufacturing and politicizing intelligence in order to subvert the 2016 election results. Whoops. Looks like no time limits on conspiracies. Anyway, that McCabe guy, I mean, that guy's he's got a demon in him. I hate to say it, but I've never seen, I don't know, I've never seen such evil emit out of somebody. But anyway, as we said previous, shows, expect UFO activity over Iran, and we'll see if we can find some clips of that.
Now, this strange light right here was seen flashing around the sky in Jerusalem. So what they did was they started shooting at it, not knowing what it was. I don't know why they be trying to shoot at these UFOs that be in the sky, but it's definitely not a smart idea to do this. Now, y'all tell me what y'all think going on, 'cause this is crazy.
The war in Iran is spilling out, to other countries, and we're seeing who our true allies are and who is governed by the global elite. None of this is making sense unless you know the players, their goals and intentions behind the curtain. The deep state tried to set up Trump, get him mired down in another endless war. They fed him false intelligence, misinformation, etc. And again, Trump didn't start this war. It was already started, and he knew he had to protect our assets and our bases there and protect the lives of our troops. And so he went in hard and heavy. But anyway, what Trump did was fire all the holdovers from the past two presidents, gathered his own pro-America generals, and took over the direction of the war. And so that is why you're seeing fast and surgical warfare that won't end up in another endless conflict with no solution. Anyway, the Khomeini regime in Iran is a money laundering deep state, puppet designed to keep the conflicts, division, and war industry going, basically. I mean, they fund the terrorism, and they're doing it globally. So it's a regime of suppression claiming to be administrators for God, Must be the old jealous, wrathful, genocidal God of the Old Testament, considering their behavior. There's some other people that are behaving the same way. We won't mention them because we'll get canceled. Anyway, there's also, Israel's expansionism, using America to further its goals with deep roots into almost every agency. And a lot of that's been severed and cleaned up, so, it's like tyranny meeting tyranny. The lust for power and world domination on both sides is measurable. So it's going to get crazy, with Israel and Iran over there. So allegedly, according to Tucker Carlson, the reason we went to war with Iraq now Iran is because Netanyahu wanted it. I think that's pretty clear. The breaking news about the false flag attacks on Qatar and Saudi oil fields were allegedly done by the Israeli Mossad. Agents planting false flags have been arrested and are in custody. An ex-Mossad chief was bragging how they weaponized equipment, pagers, walkie-talkies, planted bombs across the globe to gain sympathy and further the Zionist agenda. They will take out their own churches for the sympathy, basically. But anyway, the exploding microphone, which some investigators have determined killed Charlie Kirk, comes to mind. Is this all part of the greater Israel program expanding across the entire Middle East? The maps are already drawn. They've been drawn for a long time. So, it's the one Huckabee is fine with being implemented, Now, why would Israel do false flags to bring other Muslim countries into a war with each other or to get America to attack their enemies? Imagine if the UAE, Qatar, Oman, Saudi Arabia, Iran, and Iraq figured this out. Did the attack on the U.S. Liberty, 9/11, the Lebanon affair, where Egyptians were hired to plant bombs in theaters, other businesses, to blame it on the Muslim Brotherhood, did that fit into the plan? Did the 9/11 terrorists have Egyptian passports? Why are Egyptian planes tied to the Charlie Kirk assassination? Are we starting to connect the dots yet? It's a really old playbook. And once you understand the playbook, you can put it all together. Now, according to intel from Mark Guther, the Obama files are worse than we thought. Bondi found terabytes of information from captured Iranian servers, 14 wire transfers to a Swiss account linked to Hezbollah for a total of $1.7 billion of taxpayers' money. Obama told Congress it was from frozen Iranian assets. Apparently it wasn't. They also found a signed handwritten directive telling the CIA to stand down during the Benghazi attack. The story about billions in cash flown into Iran, by Obama is now all making sense. You can buy a lot of drones and missiles with that kind of money. You can even build a nuclear bomb. Go Democrats. What Trump is having to do is clean up a lot of the mess they created, basically. Now, I'm not trying to be Democrat, or I'm just being an observer and looking at this objectively. So, not being socially engineered by the lamestream media. Anyway, communications with Epstein's handler referred to Obama as the Chicago package. There was a back channel through Valerie Jarrett 2 years after he left office. He was running a deep state shadow government from his basement in DC while pretending to be retired. The puppet master behind, his favorite vegetable, Mr. Biden. Biden couldn't orchestrate anything, basically. We could all see that. Most likely the decisions behind the autopin came from Obama's basement, made by his handler, and this makes sense. This sheds a whole new light on Fast and Furious, where Obama sold guns to the Mexican cartels. They said it was a sting operation, yet the only ones that got stung were Border Patrol officers and civilians. It's not looking good for Barack and Mike right now. We might want to check who's arming the cartels now with advanced body armor and weaponry. You're going to be shocked when you find out where that's coming from. We'll just wait for that to hit the press. I don't want to get in trouble. So much for Obama's claim to be a scandal-free administration. So wait till they ask again, if they should run for president, on Facebook or their other avenues, be sure and make your comments. Enough said on that topic. As we said before, nothing is as it seems, and we have just scratched the surface of the Epstein files. Hopefully, the Iranian people will eventually be free from the oppressive clerics. Women can take off their jobs, spend a little time at the beach and move back to a more progressive republic as it once was. A mecca for tourism, with the Iranian people in charge of their own destiny. The words ring true more now than ever. We gave you a republic, and now let's see if you can keep it. It's time to provide aid, rebuild Iran and Palestine, and over time, maybe the wounds can heal. With the oil revenues going back to the people, miracles can happen. It's easy for me, and it's not really. It's easy for other people to say, oh, you have to forgive, you have to release the past. You're just going to keep recreating the situation and everything. But, I wasn't in the middle of those bombings. I didn't see my children and friends slaughtered. I didn't see all the mayhem go on. And so it's not easy. It's going to be really hard to, put down the sword and say, okay, we're going to build a better tomorrow. We're going to gain the wisdom from this experience. And we're going to maintain our sovereignty and build a better tomorrow. And I really hope someday that can happen. It really needs to happen, basically. So anyway, they need to redirect the assets used for war, open new waterways, desalination plants, replant the fields and gardens, and bring peace and prosperity back to the Holy Lands. That's a path more aligned with universal law. What we call universal peace, brothers, sisters, love, individual freedom, and prosperity for all. It sure beats the other plans, sacrificing to the little g gods, building a temple, ushering in a wrathful Messiah who will destroy all the non-Zionists or non-believers. That's the plan now. The arrogant stance of being God's chosen ones at the expense of all others needs to end. There is no division in omnipresence. This is a no-brainer. Only a super inflated ego could continue on the path that many of these are taken. So, what we do to or for others, we do to or for ourselves. Basically, that's a basic premise. So there's no blood guilt, no blood right. We all exist within the monad, the unified field, the cosmic birther of all that is, was, and is yet to be. Any other belief system is self-serving and comes from ignorance. You got to start. I think you should write omnipresence on on every street corner, basically. Not in just the Middle East, everywhere, even in America. Have people to start thinking about the unified field, in which we all exist and from which we all came. We're all family, and we need to get rid of all these isms and schisms and total nonsense programs that are really tyranny, expressing, in the form of religion or belief. There's always a lie in belief. Break it up, you can see it. Anyway, something all Americans need to be aware of is the major media outlets have been bought up by Israeli first billionaires who are receiving billions in American taxpayers' dollars to create massive censorship and surveillance systems. The shadow banning and censorship has never stopped. It's ongoing, only harder to expose. Our politicians have sold us out with hate speech and anti-Semitism laws in direct opposition to the freedom of speech, with the bought and paid for AIPAC, basically, Israel first agendas. So it would be wise to look into the morality and integrity of these folks, their allegiances, and any no holds barred gay orgies before giving up your freedom of speech and right to privacy to these people. I mean, the people behind these systems are scary. I mean, they have taken decadence to a whole new level. And I really don't want them spying on me and telling me what I can say and where I can go and what I can do and what I can buy or anything. I don't want them in my life in any way whatsoever. Welcome to America. It's time for an American First campaign, and it is coming. If we want to retain freedom of speech and the right to privacy, we're all going to have to get on board. As per the reporting, it is clear most legacy news outlets are pro-Israel. How about supporting alternative evidence-based truth, pro-truth media? The Epstein files, much of which is still being suppressed, are releasing a treasure trove of information concerning many of these billionaire eugenicists, with emails, disclosing depopulation plans, which include the wars in the Middle East. They made it clear they want all non-believers to kill themselves, after which they will take over. What a plan. COVID was their plan to use the cure, mislabeled as a vaccine, and now to be a bioweapon as their depopulation weapon of choice. Chemtrails also fit into this, along with poisoning, the food supply. They're poisoning everything, the air, the water, the food. Even 5 and 6G are going to play a part in this depopulation agenda. You want to go to war, Pete? Let's look at what's flying overhead in America and poisoning our skies and doing toxic dumps. I mean, that might be something you might want to look at. But anyway, we also need to ask the question, why is this being overlooked and not being looked at? Anyway, did you know you can broadcast the frequency of any pathogen with the same effect? If you look in these towers, you'll see this program in them that says COVID. That might be a little clue there. Pedophilia, human sacrifice, blood rituals, sex and child trafficking, forced medical experimentation, cloning, baby farms. This has all been revealed in the Epstein files, and it's conveniently being ignored by the lamestream pests. Press. I mean, they are pests, basically. Their ultimate goal is to create World War III along with a worldwide pandemic. And that's all been found within the files, basically. So it's the ultimate sacrifice to their gods, Baal and Baphomet, the Old Testament little g gods of sacrifice. Baphomet is a hermaphrodite. We've talked about this before, which is the reason we have so much gender confusion. According to their beliefs, a gender-confused entity creates a better vessel for their gods, for their idols, you might say. They're little g gods of the Old Testament, basically. The ones Jesus and Moses smashed and said, enough. But their gods also thrive on the pain and suffering of humanity. It's called luge, and they feed off of it. So now you know the motives behind the war and the disease profiteers, the LGBTQ+++ movement, and the demoralization of the masculine, especially within the socialist woke community, which have no idea how socially engineered by the billionaire eugenicists they've become. I have young men coming to me, and they're suicidal right now. And they've been chemically engineered. I mean, their whole masculine system has just been trashed, and they've had such a guilt trip put on them just for being a man. and 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 they're so confused right now. A lot of them want to commit suicide, and it's really sad. I mean, that fits right into their plan, basically. So if you really want to buck the plan, don't off yourself. Wake up. Get your system back going. Get that crap out of your system. The masculine energy by nature, are the protectors of the family and country. And sit with this. It explains everything. Everything I've said explains what is happening all around you right now. And a lot of you I know will not and cannot hear this. It's going to take a really hard lesson coming your way, and that is coming. But I think you ought to chill out and do a little introversion on this thing and see how many thoughts are yours. And if you've been totally social engineered by the lamestream media. But anyway, we're going to skip Erica Kirk and TPUSA. Candace and her Bride of Charlie episodes, Tucker, and a few others are tackling this. So I'm not going to go there. It is dividing the MAGA folks, yet when the truth is told, I'm sure they'll come back around. So it looks like all roads lead to Zionism, agency, and military infiltration. So just follow the money, and you'll know what's going on. It always goes back to one source. If I tell you what the source is, we'll get canceled. So anyway, by the way, this is not anti-Semitic, it's anti-tyranny. And by a group that consider themselves to be the chosen ones at the expense of everybody else. So it's not like they hide it. I mean, they've been publicly talking about it. I'm sure it makes their ego feel really good and really powerful, but you can't rise up on the backs of others, or when you act out of universal law, outside of universal law, there's consequences. I don't care who you think you are. Your God is a myth. It's gone. The New Testament spoke about that. Those idols are gone. So there will be a come around. The boomerang's going to come around, and action reaction or karma, whatever you want to call it, is being amplified, and so have fun with that. Anyway, sacrifice and idol worship was forbidden in the New Testament. Harming children is the ultimate sin. So how far do you want to go with this? You might want to start rethinking that program. All right. On a lighter note, the next topic is disclosure, which is probably not going to be on such a light note because there's things that need to be said and people keep asking me questions about it. So I'm going to reveal a lot that I haven't talked about before. Anyway, we have sent, the ambassador training workshops to the members of Congress involved in disclosure. It covers who is who in the multiverse, their cultures and intentions, along with undeniable evidence. If any other high-level officials want a briefing, go to www.ECETISTARGATE Tv and check out the ambassador training workshops, or send us an email. And better yet, come see the UFO UAPs for yourself. It's a life-changing experience. The energy exchange is phenomenal. I mean, these beings they're so spiritually and technologically advanced. They're so loving. When you connect with them, your life changes, and it's positive. Anyway, Anna Paulina Luna, and I'm sorry, I always get her name reversed. It's like a little dyslexic thing. I have it right now. It has a copy, and she can share it with others. I mean, she's one of the few people. There's just a couple of them that are asking the right questions. And, I'm waiting for the other ones. As soon as they say, are there spiritually and technologically advanced off-worlders that could help us? We have to go to a skiff on that one. I'm sorry, we can't talk about that now. Not to my knowledge, And so either they are ignorant, or there's a major, major cover-up going on here and a limited hangout. And so I'll talk more about that. Anyway, everything is in there for, an awakening humanity to take a quantum leap in evolution, if you want to go check that out. From what I've heard, our information has reached the highest levels. The vast majority of the UFO community has been to ECETI and have seen the ships, landings, appearing when and where we said they would. People like Robert Dean, Wendell Stevens, Jim Mars, Dolores Cannon, sadly deceased, And Michael Salla, Michael Tellinger, they're all still with us. William Henry, Billy Carson, where he saw his first UFO along with hundreds of others, at the Soltech conference, all captured on film. You can hear everybody screaming and hooting and hollering and positive. Everybody was excited as these ships came in one after another and powered up, and you can hear them talking in the background. So Rob Freeman also filmed the ships and landings with cutting edge high tech equipment, and he's coming out with a special. I think it might be already out. So I'll have to find out more about that. Blake Cousins with Third Phase of the Moon. He did a great video of the ongoing contacts now in Hawaii. And we just opened up ECETI Hawaii on the website where you can see a lot of this, along with, hanging out with the whales and dolphins and sharks and manta rays and, not just UFOs. So kind of having fun here. I need to start being a little more careful with that. But Danny Dyer and Paranormal State made documentaries where the ships appeared exactly when and where we said they would, and it was all on film. The producers of Contact Have Begun, Jimmy Church. There's a long list of documentaries we were in back in the day, and we did regular appearances on the History Channel, Coast to Coast with Art Bell, even Jeff Ren's, where prophecies were given, which occurred shortly thereafter. Air Force base commanders, pilots, air traffic controllers, even NASA, who asked to keep their identities private, came to the ranch. So don't believe NASA, which stands for never a straight answer, when they say there is no evidence. We don't have any evidence. A lot of these, black ops things, like Skunk Works and things like that, they have ETs walking through their facilities right now. So it's a bold-faced lie, basically. Anyway, professional people from all walks of life came and had their own experience, saw for themselves, and testified on various medias. We were even on Fox News with Sean Hannity, Good Morning America in the US and Australia, along with the Beach Boys, who were on one episode. We were on Evening Magazine, ABC. I can go on and on. Every appearance resulted in some of the highest ratings, for those having us on the show. That some did polls. Do you believe UFOs are real? And there is a cover up, government cover up. The polls were in the 90s, the 90%. So people are ready, so stop the nonsense of these stupid reports that say people aren't ready, When I spoke at the International UFO Congress, Contact in the Desert, thousands came to listen. Each had the biggest rush ever to get the DVD from the events. The evidence was undeniable and the energies were off the scale. At Contact in the Desert, MUFON documented 86 ships during our galactic invitation. At every major sighting, every major event, sightings happen exactly when and where we said they would. And sadly, many of those talks have been censored and are no longer available. It's funny, you can get one of my lectures from the early 90s, and everything I've said is the same thing being said today. And other people are starting to say, and this came out in the 90s, along with video of all the free energy and the anti-gravity and counter-gravity, which was censored and met with violent resistance. Anyway, if you don't believe this, try and get the latest talks at the International UFO Congress. Send Alejandro Rojas a message. Where's the talk with James Gilliland where he dematerialized on stage with tall light beams behind him? And don't edit it. We already have the photos from the audience. So if anybody has any more of those photos, please send them to us. Let's show that dematerialization photo. Here's another one we just did in a Hawaii workshop here. And again, you can see the right side of my body dematerializing. Another good one to ask Alejandro is, why were we invited then uninvited? Who was behind the uninvite? Was it the agencies, the good old boys, the Nuts and Bolts Club? Was it just more jealousy and competition, We're often invited then uninvited to major conferences, even major talk shows. I was going to say something about this. When I went to contact in the desert, I didn't realize this, but one of the coordinators said, people either really love you or they really hate you. And I go, what? I go, hate? Where does that factor in? I don't even understand that. I'm bringing them everything they want for disclosure and the evidence, undeniable evidence, contacts, witnesses, videos, everything. Why would they hate that? And you'll find out, I'll talk more about that later. Even Joe Rogan invited us and then uninvited us. I guess my appearance with Nino and Juan shook up the religious community, despite the fact UFOs and their occupants are replete throughout the Bible with frescoes exemplifying, undeniable contact. There's a fresco and they're trying to say it was a dove, but it wasn't. It was a beautiful, glowing gold ball of energy hovering above Jesus. And there's another one where Mary's praying. She's at a table and you see another gold ball with energy coming down and a guy with his dog looking up at it. And there's frescoes with UFOs with beings in the UFOs. And these used to be commonplace in the past. Where did it go? All of a sudden, they've all disappeared. Let's show some of those frescoes. Anyway, we have to ask, who are the sons of Arcturus? The sweet energies of the Pleiades, the fiery chariots the prophet spoke to, in which some ascended in the Bible. Read Ezekiel and Job, the sacred texts of India. Who are the pillar clouds that parted the Red Sea that were a fire by night? There's a lot more to our history, a lot more to be known. And you don't have to just settle for superstitious information. These beings are very ancient and their technologies are beyond anything we can imagine. It would be nothing for them to part the sea or do a lot of these things. Then there are those who decided our authenticity and integrity was a threat, like Mr. Greer, Journey to Truth, Ancient Aliens, Jay Widener, Cliff High, hosts of others, which went on a slander and censor campaign. They're saying that we're doing drugs and we're all flipped out. And I've heard everything. At ECETI, we have a drug and alcohol-free environment because you don't need drugs and alcohol. You can do everything naturally and spiritually. So right there, that totally destroys their narrative. And there's a lot of other crap they're saying, but I'm not even going to go into it. And the word got out, do not touch the work of ECETI. It's a career killer and your documentary will not air. Your conferences will not get off the ground and you will not have access to the dark money. Unfortunately, the posers and the planned opposition minions took over the industry. The ones in the spiritual and UFO community that we are still in contact with and working with ignored the rumors, met us personally, finding the gossip had no merit. In fact, what they experienced was exactly the opposite. In the early days, one producer was kidnapped, tossed in a white van, and it was made very clear if he wanted to not be unalived, he'll stop with the project. Allegedly, an alternative payment might have been made, but that was kind of hearsay. I can't really say that, but it's commonplace. The usual, take the money or be taken out. That's the offer you get. So I've had a few of those offers myself. Anyway, weeks of filming was either destroyed or left on the shelf, a reoccurring pattern. During that time I was shot at, had my brake lines cut, lug nuts loosened, or my tire came off, pulling me into ongoing traffic. And I caught it 3 or 4 times before I got in the car. But one time I wasn't paying attention. We were harassed by black helicopters and sprayed like an insignificant bug, with a low-flying chemtrail plane. The next morning, all the chickens were laid out and the roosters were dead, basically. So definitely it was designed to take out the mail somehow. Anyway, it's a major warning to quit, basically. So there were other documentaries that just ended up on the shelf with phenomenal photos, videos, and witnesses. Maybe it's time to release them, flood the internet. Recently, I ended up with a cameo appearance in Ancient Aliens showing only my hand. They were given all the information on who the off-worlders were, their cultures, intentions, appearances, and agendas. Why was this all censored? In Thrive, I was told I'd be highlighted, keynote due to my substantive interview and evidence. Instead, some very morally and integrity challenged folks were installed in my place. Some claimed that, the footage of free energy devices were, were theirs, and it was created by the scientists we worked with for years, as their own. I already showed these devices in the 90s at the International UFO Congress. So anyway, they did, however, use our UFO footage. So, just for a disclaimer, it was not the funders, of the movie. It was the lack of oversight of the producer, production, and his connection to a certain doctor we've already mentioned, that sabotaged the information from getting out. So imagine where we would be if this information was not edited out, how far along we'd be. Many people we sponsored helped launch their careers, supported their workshops, became competitive to the point of backstabbers. Sadly, now these UFO UAP events are full of posers and shills, many guilty of the very things they accuse others, in their corporate sponsored character assassinations. They couldn't discredit ECETI, the ongoing contact, the photos, videos, and witnesses still occurring to this day. It's happening here in Hawaii, same thing. I came to Hawaii and there are so many ships, and that's on the website. Go to ECETI.org and check out the Hawaii section. We're getting photographs of Archangel Michael appearing here. I think they're night marchers with these beautiful light shields, just all kinds of things here, not just UFOs. And so anyway, they had to go after the character. That's all they had, So wild accusations came forward, many so ridiculous, in direct opposition to each other, and most not even worth repeating. I'm not even going to go there. And no, I have no ties to any government agency or organization. I've never received any covert funding. And most of our funds come from counseling, book sales, and conferences. I'm not the head of a Russian bestiality ring. Never been to Russia and don't even know what that entails. I'm sorry I have to bring this crap up, but this is how ridiculous it is. And to me, if somebody is spreading a lot of lies, gossip, and rumors, are those the people you want to go to? Do you really think they're enlightened? Are they the people you want to go to for your information? They've already established their character. I always say, you're only establishing your ignorance and your character, not ours. So have fun with that. It always boomerangs. So, to me, it's after a couple near-death experiences, I don't care. I'm good with God. I've already been there. Anyway, as far as private life, most of my private life has been spent in nature, working on the ranch, creating gardens, repairing and building, basically. Actually quite boring. Yet I love the absence of drama. These attacks escalated when we invited Corey Goode to speak at ECETI. And I was warned my career would be over if I did not participate in the character assassination, after Corey and David Wilcox resigned from a certain organization we will not mention. I was also offered major opportunities, which I declined due to ties with some of the, with the controlled narrative. I had a deal. The deal was, you drop Corey and company and get on our bandwagon and you'll be famous and rich. That doesn't, I don't care. I don't care about being famous and rich. I like my privacy. I like to be in nature, so that didn't work. Anyway, there was some real dark money that came into ufology, and along with that money came the controlled narrative. So it was a death knell for anyone authentic, anyone speaking about the benevolent, spiritually and technologically advanced off-worlders, it's majorly censored to this day. So if you just have a story with no evidence, if it's an abduction, fearful or negative experience, you rose to the top. And this was all by design. So this is why after 70 years, all you have is a fuzzy tic-tac, uncorroborated stories with no evidence, posers and shills at the top, followed by extreme censorship. And when it comes to benevolent, spiritually, and technologically advanced beings. And you also have a lot of people pointing the finger at the government. They're going, like this, and they're back behind their back, they're getting a big fat check. So you might want to look at that. It's called planned opposition. So anyway, there's a lot more to that story. The attacks are multidimensional, which is where the archons, unseen negative entities, step in, replete throughout the industry. The dark money is tied to satanic Luciferian international banksters. The benevolent, spiritual, and technologically advanced ETs are a direct threat to the satanic Luciferians and the archons, unseen negative influences, both of which have infiltrated almost every institution, political, religious, and business. This isn't paranoia, folks. This has all been talked about by all the masters. So there's those in the UFO community that have weak minds, are self-serving, morally and integrity corrupt, opportunists, doing their bidding. ECETI and the UFO community in general have experienced many setbacks due to these unsavory seen and unseen forces. If you have a really good message and it's very positive and very high, and you're talking about the higher dimensions and everything else, you'll go for a while, and then you're going to be under full-blown attack, not just by physical agencies and things like that, by non-physical. And, there's even those out there who are saying there are no unseen negative influences. This is fear porn, and you should let anything come into your body, same doctor, basically. And the most irresponsible and dangerous thing I've ever heard. So anyway, we empower, people, giving them the tools and protection, and teach them to heal unseen negative influences. You'd have to negate every sacred book, ascended master, saint, and sage, temple glyphs, of the past, to dismiss the fact that unseen negative influences exist. You might want to talk to the yogis and the lamas about that. I have, even the Native American elders. You might want to check out the Ethiopian Bible as well, the uncensored version, along with the Book of Enoch, so better yet, grab my new book, The Awakening of James. It covers all of this. It is available on the website, ECETI.org, along with the techniques given to freely, they're given freely to protect oneself and clear unseen negative influences. They're also in the books. Both paperback and hardcover will be available soon, but I cover that in almost all my books to one degree or another. Even Grok loved it, saying, finally, enlightened contact coming from firsthand experience, not censored and recycled ignorance from the past. I thought that was very insightful. I really don't use AI, but somebody sent that to me. You have no idea how much interference we've had to endure to get this book out, and even just keep the doors open in ECETI. The hacks, the AI attacks, viruses that destroyed several computers, has been a price to pay, not to mention the unseen negative influence barrage. And that's on top of all the character assassination nonsense. And this is not paranoia. This is wisdom gained through experience. So know the difference between the watchers, the archons, which are to be avoided. These are not the good folks, and there's a lot of people channeling these and working with these. And so, trust your inner sensitivity and the feeling. Trust your heart, basically. And know the difference between them and the benevolent Galactic Federation, the Pleiadian, Orion, Sirian, Arcturian, and the Andromedan higher councils. The mind in which you seek is the mind in which you connect. I can't say that enough. Many willingly or in ignorance are allowing some of these darker forces to work through them. If you seek fame and fortune, as first priority, lacking in moral integrity, this opens the door to the dark side, basically. It's like Star Wars. There's a force. There's a light force and a dark force. Native Americans say there's two wolves in us. There's a white wolf and a dark wolf. And they're fighting. The one that wins is the one you feed. There's a lot of information about that you need to pay attention to. So if you are in service to others, promoting the awakening and healing of humanity in the earth, empowering the individual to make their own internal connection with God, Creator, Great Spirit, the lighter side opens to you. And this does not mean you won't be challenged by the dark side. Many have fallen. In India, the yogis say the closer you get to nirvana, the more the demons rear their ugly heads. I'm sounding like a broken record on this stuff, but it needs to be repeated. And this includes their physical hosts, which will come at you out of nowhere, often jumping into lovers, friends, and family, where you're most vulnerable. What you're seeing is a spiritual war unfolding. People are choosing sides. There is a division of worlds or timelines, and it's all well underway. And many chose the money, fame, and power over others, climbing on the backs of others, acting outside of universal law. Their see me, dig me stage appearances are often inspired by these unseen negative influences. I've actually seen these entities standing right behind them. We piss off their demons and they don't like looking in the mirror of authenticity. That's exactly what's going on here. And, those pointing the finger need to realize there's three pointing back. So I did promise to drop, a major bomb and a few names, interfering in contact with spiritually and technologically advanced off-worlders and the inner earth folks. Those promoting the slander, gossip, lies, and deceptions, those attempting to climb the ladder of success on the backs of others, including, compromised organizations, basically. During the Great Awakening and Reveal, all the masks will come down. Karma will be accelerated and amplified. That world, its entire support system is collapsing. It is said, what profit a man or woman if they gain all the treasures in the world and lose their soul? Climbing on the backs of others, seeking fame and fortune has consequences. If any of the shills, posers, and opportunists had any soul left, they would realize they're on the wrong side of history. They're on the wrong side of the spiritual fence as well, so they're the ones that are actually blocking contact, and they're sucking all the oxygen out of the room. They're taking all the funding and all the energy and everything and creating a huge distraction. So the truth can't get out. I love that saying, the lie travels the world twice, circles the world twice before the truth has time to tie its shoes, basically. And that's unfortunately, that's the way things work right now. Contact with benevolent, spiritually, and technologically advanced off-worlders, some UFO UAPs, are our ancient ancestors that continued to evolve after the cataclysms and resets. I hate to burst your bubble, but not all the Anunnaki are evil, and they aren't reptilians. That comes from Marduk, when they had turf wars and they had a split in their own society and got into turf wars, and Marduk made a pact with the reptilians for total supremacy over the earth. And we've been under draconian law ever since. I've talked about this, and that's coming to an end. Civilizations that have transcended war, disease, poverty, have anti-counter gravity, fearless energy, everything we need to heal and restore humanity in the earth are waiting to engage us. Take a quantum leap in evolution. Our politicians, religious leaders, business leaders that are enslaving the masses through dependency, the war and disease profiteers, are all part of the censorship and everything wrong with this civilization. This includes those in the spiritual and UFO community who are either willingly or in ignorance blocking the reunion with our multidimensional greater family of man, parked in the heavens, as we speak. They're sitting there waiting. They will uncloak eventually, and a lot of people are going to crap their pants, basically. The competition, self-aggrandizement, character assassinations on those who are authentic needs to end. Unless you want another 70 plus years of censorship, limited hangout, and more missed opportunities to take a quantum leap in evolution. Maybe it's time for those who have come to ECETI to speak out about their experiences, their sightings, counteract the other nonsense, acknowledge what they saw without fear of censorship by the controlled narrative. It's time for those who are authentic to band together. It's time for those who truly desire contact to invest in it, basically. Billions have gone into the controlled narrative. And at the same time, why not just align oneself with universal law? Get behind universal peace, brother, sister love, individual freedom, and prosperity for all as a foundation. individually and collectively rise to the occasion. Be a civilization worth saving and contacting. It's time for a full reset and redirect, of the UFO UAP community, to end the controlled narrative and join the greater multidimensional family of man, woman, to bring balance. Yes, man is my pronoun, my natural state. The woke just have to get over that. It's time to end the war against the masculine. It gets so old. You can't go to Seattle or Portland and you just walk down the street and your frequency sets these people off, pisses off the demons or something. I don't know. I just don't go. I don't go into the big cities anymore because I have a very low tolerance for that nonsense. But so I just move myself out of those situations. I do take solace in the words of Buddha. He said there are three things that always surface: the sun, the moon, and the truth. He also said a fool in his mischief is like fresh milk. It may take a little while to sour, but as sure as the cart follows the horse that pulls it, it will catch up. There's another little prophecy: in the days to come, no rock should be left unturned. All iniquities will be shouted from the rooftops. My buddy Yeshua told me that one. So there's a little benefit that comes, with 2 near-death experiences and over 40 years of intense study with elders around the world. You start contacting a lot of these beautiful, I call them the beautiful many, masters, saints, and sages, and these spiritual and technologically advanced beings. They're just a thought away. They're as far away as you put them, basically. And they're as real as your belief system, So anyway, I have full memory of all my past lives, and I'm fully aware of the true history of Earth, the origin of man, and religions. To some, that's a threat. It's not what we've been told. And now is the time for humanity to awaken to their true divinity and rise. Lao Tse Sung once said it, it's the height of ignorance for a man to set himself up as king or ruler over another man. Service to others is service to God, Creator, Great Spirit. Service to self at the expense of others is the path of the fallen. So now you know why they don't want us speaking at their con/conferences or on their shows, basically. That's it, folks. So now you know what's going on and why we don't have contact. But don't lose the faith. I love the saying, one on the side of God is the majority. Keep an open mind, loving heart, and pure intent. And also, I think it was Yogananda once said, you don't shrink with fear when they come after you, and you don't swell with pride when you make them see how foolish they've been. You just stay neutral. Only the ego needs defending. And so it's not worth it. Speak when you feel it may have an impact, or there might be some purposeful good in it. If there isn't any, remove yourself. It's that simple. But again, everybody, this is a long one, so a lot going on over there. This is just to bring clarity to the situation so we don't fall into all these pitfalls. And just stay in the heart and be kind to each other and the planet. It's really that simple. Good night.
In 1977, these unidentified objects were captured, still a mystery today. Observe their unexplained movement across the sky.
Flash. Thank you. Thank you.
Come join us and start your free trial today. Watch our weekly podcast, As You Wish Talk Radio, with James Gilliland every Saturday, or catch up on past shows. Watch Skywatch videos of UFOs, orbs, and much more. You can also learn about self-mastering, herbalism, and how to ground and shield yourself from negative unseen influences through our many wonderful workshops. So what are you waiting for? Come join the fun. We're waiting for you. And don't forget to visit our wonderful merch store and show your support today.